Find yourself looking for a new job or change in career? Monster.com is here to help. We are not only here to bring you job postings, but also AI interview prep and salary tools, expert career advice, and top-notch resume services. We've got everything you need to land your perfect job fit. Discover the magic of finding the ideal job with Monster.com. Your future starts now. Visit Monster.com today. Your next job opportunity is just a click away.
Hey, it's Adam Carolla.
And this is Dr. Drew. We're back doing our podcast 3 times a week, talking about current events, health news, and more.
So, if you miss us on Loveline, check out the Adam and Dr. Drew show. New episodes Wednesday through Friday, available wherever you find finer podcasts.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 396 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you?
I'm doing very good, I must say.
All right. Did you have good holidays?
Absolutely.
Yep, me too.
Yeah.
We want to wish everybody a happy new year. You know, this is our first episode of 2025.
The big year.
It could be. We don't know. I make no predictions anymore on how the year is going to go.
No predictions, no promises.
No promises.
Day by day.
All I know is it is a new year. Let's go ahead and give our Patreon shout outs. We had Kim Lechner.
Hey, Kim.
Matt.
What's up, Matt?
Alicia Russ.
Hey, Russ.
Melanie Shepard.
There's a shepherd.
Kyle.
Hey, Kyle.
AJ Kalisak.
What up, AJ?
Ange C. and the Big D.
Well, thanks, Ange and the Big D.
Lavana Meadows.
What's going on, Meadows?
Matt Davis.
Hey, thanks, Davis.
Rose.
Good old Rose.
Tony.
There's Tony.
And last but not least, Howard Horn jumped out to our highest level.
Horn coming through.
Yeah, we appreciate that. And then if we go back into the vault, this week we selected Insane Kane.
Hey, Insane.
So we appreciate the new support, the continued support. We also had a very generous PayPal donation from our good friend, Melinda Wargacki.
Well, you're awesome, Melinda.
Yeah, we love Melinda. She's local to us, and we see her at CrimeCon every year.
We do.
She brings her husband sometimes, and he's a cool guy as well. All right, we have an episode out on True Crime All the Time where we're talking about the murder of Carrie Farver. And, you know, to me, this is a fascinating case. Carrie Farver went missing, and a number of people in her life started receiving very strange text messages from her. Some of them were stalker type. Some of them were harassing. Some of them were even threatening. And it took some time, but investigators finally figured out who was behind the disappearance of Carrie Farver.
Such a good twist, though.
It is. A lot of twists and turns, and I don't want to give anything away. All right, buddy, are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved?
I am ready.
We're headed to Canada for this episode to talk about the Mad Trapper. The Mad Trapper of Rat River was a Canadian fugitive who killed 2 RCMP officers and was killed by a posse seeking justice. He was identified as Albert Johnson after his death, but investigators believe this is an alias. So the Mad Trapper's true identity remains a mystery nearly 100 years later.
How do you feel about posses?
Like now in 2025?
Yeah.
Not a fan.
Okay.
Not a fan of posses. Now, if we're in the Old West, I could understand.
Sure.
Why there were, you know, posses who went after rustlers or, whatever it was. I mean, we have, enough law enforcement officers in today's society, I think, to to take care of what we need taken care of.
No need for a posse today.
No, why are you thinking about forming a posse?
Sounds fun. Hey, let's put a posse together. I don't know what we're going to do.
Okay.
Let's go wrangle up something.
What it made me think of was that movie Django Unchained.
Yeah.
Where Don Johnson is leading the posse and they're wearing the masks.
Right.
And they're all complaining about the holes in the masks and they can't see anything. It just, I don't know. It was a funny part of the movie.
It was.
But this case has been described as the most bizarre and dramatic manhunt in Canada's history. According to the White Horse Daily Star, the entire drama was played out in the sub-zero temperatures of the midwinter darkness above the Arctic Circle. Albert Johnson was on the run for 48 days. Avoiding the RCMP and experienced trappers hunting him down. In total, the chase encompassed 240 kilometers.
That's a pretty good span.
Yeah, so about 150 miles or so for us here in the States. The White Horse Daily Star reported that the forest of Arctic Canada is the homeland of the Lashope people who depend on hunting, fishing, and trapping for survival. They are considered the most skilled hunters of the Arctic forest. For a man like Albert Johnson to survive in this environment, he would have to be able-bodied, intelligent, and have vast experience living in the wilderness. And I think that's a pretty easy statement to make. If you're in the Arctic, you're not just going to be able to wing that.
No.
You're going to need to be prepared, in good shape, and have some survival skills relevant to that situation.
Yeah, it's going to provide you some challenges.
Absolutely. Albert Johnson arrived in Ross River, a community in the Yukon, in August 1927. Local trappers soon filed complaints against him with the RCMP. Johnson disappeared for a while, but then reappeared in July 1931 on the Peel River in Fort McPherson, a hamlet in the Inuvik region of the Northwest Territory. According to Maclean's magazine, Johnson arrived on a raft, which he beached above Fort McPherson. At the time, the settlement consisted of a group of cabins and a trading post. He entered the trading post and shouldered past the customers inside. Witnesses described him as a medium-sized man, 35 to 40, slightly stoop-shouldered, sun-reddened, fly-bitten.
What a visual that would be.
Yeah. What is a medium-sized man?
I really don't know.
He wasn't small.
I'm thinking stocky.
He wasn't large.
He was medium-sized.
He was medium-sized. But they said it looked like he had been living in the wilderness for months. Johnson placed a supply order. Within 10 days, Gibbs, he spent $1,400 at the trading post. He explained that he was getting an outfit together to trap in Rat River country. Bill Douglas, owner of the trading post, noticed that Johnson had several $1,000s on him. Johnson's order suggested he was not going to spend the winter in one place.
That's a lot of money back then.
Yes, it is. You know, to have several $1,000s on you today, you're walking around with quite a bit of money.
Sure.
To be walking around with $2,000 or $3,000 in 1931, that's a boatload.
It is. I think you'd be asking for some trouble.
Well, you could be if people knew that you had it. And obviously, at the very least, the owner of the trading post knew that he had it. I mean, but to spend $1,400 in 10 days on supplies. I mean, what would that be in today's dollars? We haven't done that in a while, but beep.
Well, they'd be like dropping 30,000. That's a lot of beans and rice.
You might be pretty close. I really have no idea, but I'm with you. It seems like it would be a lot of supplies. And I think if you're Bill Douglas, you're noticing that, these supplies are not meant to, be used all at one place. Like this guy's going to be traveling around.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? The people of Fort McPherson considered Johnson an unsociable loner. He preferred to stay in his cabin or camp alone.
Well, isn't that kind of what a loner is?
Unsociable?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's an oxymoron. I don't know.
I mean, you don't like to come out of your basement.
I do.
You could be considered a loner, maybe even a unsociable loner.
Maybe. The community thought he was strange because the population in this area was so small. Most people were friendly. They enjoyed social interaction when they could get it. Johnson made them uneasy.
Well, there's always somebody in the group that has to make people feel uneasy.
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about, a larger city, a larger population, is he going to stand out? And the answer is no, probably not. But if you've got a couple of hundred people, and I don't know what the population was, one person who, let's say, is acting differently than the rest of the people, not what they expect.
Yeah.
That's really going to stand out.
Sure.
Johnson had his first brush with law enforcement when RCMP Constable Edgar Millen came to Fort McPherson. Millen was on a routine patrol from the Arctic Red River RCMP detachment 30 miles southeast. Millen had heard reports of the stranger in town and wanted to talk to Bill Douglas about him. Douglas told him that Johnson purchased a canoe from a local, and based on the questions he asked Douglas, he assumed Johnson was going up Rat River over the mountains of White Pass and onto the Porcupine River, which flows into Alaska. Douglas mentioned that when Johnson first arrived, he asked a group of people on the river where he was. He seemed annoyed when they told him he was on the Peel River, almost like he thought he should have been on a different river.
What do you mean I'm on the Peel River?
Well, Millen knew that the Peel and Porcupine Rivers are only a few miles apart and could be easily mistaken. But does it also seem strange that you have this RCMP officer who hears about a new guy in town? He's like, I better go talk to that guy.
I better go 30 miles to go find out what's going on. That's probably a pretty healthy
Trek?
yeah.
Millen decided he should talk to Johnson and found him on a steamboat landing. He introduced himself, and Johnson seemed reluctant to shake his hand. Millen asked if there was anything he could do for him, but Johnson said he didn't need help. Millen assumed he was Swedish based on his accent. Now, maybe he had a real Swedish accent. Maybe he was pulling a Gibby. We don't know.
I mean, many people have a hard time figuring out where I come from.
For good reason. Millen asked how he got to Fort McPherson, and Johnson said he came from the McKenzie River. Millen believed he was lying. He asked Johnson if he was going to stay long. Johnson said he didn't know. Millen told him that if he wanted to trap, he could give him a license so he didn't have to come to the RCMP station in Arctic Red River. Johnson said he hadn't made up his mind and told the officer he was going over Rat River Portage. Millen suggested that he hire a guy, and apparently Johnson raised his voice, saying, "No, I don't want people bothering me. I like to live alone. You police just cause me trouble. I don't want nothing to do with you. You want to know all about me? All right, I'm not staying here. If I'm not staying here, you don't have to know all about me. Eh?"
Oh, they threw in the A.
You got the A in there,
Yeah.
and that makes it real Canadian.
It does. A. But he's right in one sense. I understand what he's trying to say.
Well, I do too. I mean, you are getting a little bit of a vibe here of, this RCMP officer kind of intruding in on him. Like he hasn't done anything wrong that anybody knows about, and he's kind of badgering him with all these questions. Just before Christmas 1931, a group of Lashoy people came to the Arctic Red River police station. They complained that Albert Johnson had failed to get up the Rat River Rapids and was spending the winter at the mouth of Rat Canyon. He built a cabin near their historic trap line and was throwing their traps out and replacing them with his own. When they went to talk to him, he threatened them with a rifle. So, I think I've talked about it before, but, I used to watch this show where this guy I think he would fly into Alaska and he would trap for the winter.
Yeah.
And he would kind of live in a little cabin. You know what people who make their living trapping would not appreciate is someone throwing their traps out and replacing them with their own.
Yeah, it's kind of looked down upon.
Well, they've done a lot of work and it's their trap line and that's how they probably feed their family or whatever. Yeah.
If you establish those trap lines and have worked them all this time, you're not going to be happy if someone comes along and takes it away from you.
Constable Millen told Constable A.W. King that he should go up to speak to Johnson. King departed for Johnson's cabin on December 26th, accompanied by Joe Bernard, a civilian employed by the police. Because Johnson lived in such a remote area, it took them 3 days to get there with a sled dog team.
Oh, the good old days of sled dog teams.
You know where I don't want to go? Is anywhere where you have to take a sled dog team. It sounds cold. It sounds dangerous. I love dogs, but if I can't drive there or fly there, I probably don't need to be there.
I don't see you enjoying yourself in that type of environment.
No, being a trapper, living in a cabin, that does not sound like my milieu.
Eating a can of beans for dinner?
No.
Out of the can.
Constable King left Bernard and the dogs near the riverbank and walked to the cabin. He called out to Johnson. He saw that smoke was coming from the cabin, but Johnson wasn't answering. King walked around the cabin and saw that someone made holes in each corner, most likely for their rifle. Okay. I think if you're law enforcement, that's a little scary.
Yeah, I think you get a little nervous.
Johnson eventually came to a small window, but refused to speak. King knew he would have to make a 160-mile round trip to obtain a search warrant. King departed and returned to the cabin mid-morning on December 31st. He was accompanied by Joe Bernard, Constable R.G. McDowell, and a Lashoy man named Lazarus Siddichulis. So 3 days to get out there, decides that he needs a search warrant, and it's going to be a number of days before he gets back out.
Back in the good old days, right? Before technology. Well, let's take the dog sled, go back, let's get the judge, and then turn around and come back again.
King instructed Joe Bernard to stay with the sled dogs and asked Lazarus to scout the back. King went to the cabin, knocked on the door, and called out for Johnson. He announced that he had a search warrant and he was going to break down the door if Johnson didn't open up. When King pushed against the door with his shoulder, he was thrown back by a gunshot to his side. Johnson fired multiple shots through his cabin door. Constable R.G. McDowell fired back, but the team had to retreat so that King could get medical treatment. It took about 20 hours to get him to the Aklavik Anglican Mission Hospital. A doctor determined that the bullet pierced King's stomach, missed his heart by an inch, and missed his lungs by less than an inch. Aklavik was and still is a tiny community, so news of the shooting spread quickly. So here's the other thing, Gibbs. I don't want to be anywhere where the closest place to get medical treatment is 20 hours away.
By dog sled.
Most likely. Obviously, that means there's no Best Buy right around the corner.
Well, that's going to be a problem for you.
It is going to be a real problem.
No internet. Yeah.
Amazon's not delivering out there, I'm sure. Although they might. They could probably drop a drone down in there.
Well, today maybe. Yeah.
No, in Amazon. But, kidding aside, this is a bad scene. You have law enforcement officers who want to go out and talk to this guy because it was alleged that, he threatened some people. He doesn't open the door. He just starts firing through the door and, hits King with some pretty brutal shots.
It's almost like old Wild West days.
Well, it's not that far removed from it.
Well, that's true.
We are talking about the 1930s here. A.N. Eames was the inspector in charge of the local RCMP office. He put together a posse consisting of himself, Constable R.G. McDowell, Lazarus Sidachoulis, Joe Bernard, and 3 trappers, Ernest Sutherland, Carl Gardland, and Knud Lang. Okay, so we talked about, a posse earlier, and this is what I think of as a posse, being led by law enforcement officers, not so much being just a group of vigilantes.
Right.
But I think the term can be used in multiple ways. But what are they going to do? I mean, this is a man who, fired on a law enforcement officer. They're not going to let him get away with that. They have to go get him. The one thing that I do think was smart was that they got some more people. They got some numbers.
I think you need more people.
Because this guy obviously has already proven that he's going to fire first and ask questions later.
This is your before and after story. Prepare for an incredible career in nursing. At Southeastern College, experience expert hands-on training. Learn real-world skills in our professional lab and simulated settings. And train for opportunities as a practical nurse, registered nurse, or career advancement with our RN to BSN program. At Southeastern College, your future is bright. Visit sac.edu to get started.
They thought that Johnson would be more willing to give himself up if the party included trappers. The RCMP once again set out for Johnson's cabin, this time armed with dynamite to destroy the walls of the cabin.
That's one way to make those walls come down.
Yeah, I'm assuming they didn't have the battering rams and things that police have today. But again, they're not going to take any chances. Knowing this guy's already opened fire on an officer, hey, we're just going to blow your house down and come in and fire, is probably what they were thinking. While camping, they were joined by Newt Millen, who heard about the story on the radio. Inspector Eames also hired a guide to take them overland instead of traveling down the Rat River. In total, it took 8 days to get to Johnson's cabin.
That's a long hike.
Once they arrived, Inspector Eames called out to Johnson and told him there was no serious charge against him because the constable was not dead. He informed him there were 8 of them outside and warned him not to make things difficult for himself. And I think that's a pretty smart idea. Letting, this guy know right away, hey, you're not wanted for murder. This guy's not dead. Also, there's 8 of us out here.
Yeah.
So maybe that's going to make you weigh your options a little differently.
Think reasonable.
There were no lights on in Johnson's cabin. As the posse moved closer, they were shot at. 2 men managed to get to the door and attempted to break it open, but they were forced back by heavy gunfire. From their cover, Eames tried to talk to Johnson again. Johnson fired another shot. The one thing you would have to say is this guy has no interest in talking to you. If every time you say something, he takes a shot at you, after 2 or 3 times, you're probably going to get the message.
Yeah, I think he's trying to tell you something, right?
Yeah, we're not negotiating here. There's not going to be a dialogue. There's not going to be a rapport between these 2 people. Eames decided it was time to use the dynamite to break into the cabin, but it had no effect because it detonated in the open.
Well, that's a problem. For it to work, you have to have it up against the cabin wall, right?
Yeah, that would make sense. But to get it up near the cabin wall, maybe they would have to get, in firing range, which could be
deadly.
Around midnight, posse member Knud Lang suggested he get on the roof and use dynamite there. His plan was successful. The blast exposed Johnson crouching on the floor of his cabin with a sawed-off shotgun in one hand and a revolver in the other. Johnson fired at him, forcing Lang to retreat. Lang reported that Johnson was holding 2 guns, had 2 more rifles, and was hiding behind a double barrier of logs.
Smart.
Pretty smart. Johnson and the posse spent the next few hours in a standoff. Johnson fired at them anytime they tried to approach. So, again, I don't think there's any doubt, right? On the part of the police, you're dealing with a very dangerous individual This is a man who had already shot one RCMP officer. He's firing at anybody that even gets close to the cabin.
Seems like he has plenty of ammo.
At 3 a.m., Inspector Eames threw the last of his dynamite against the front of the cabin. Johnson fired at them again, forcing them to the riverbank. Yeah, he might have had quite a bit of ammo, but Inspector Eames knew they only had 1 day's supply of food. It was also 50 below zero, and they were all exhausted.
50 below.
50 below. I get perturbed when we get, 10, 20 degrees.
Yeah.
To me, that is too cold. 50 below, I'm not putting a pinky outside.
And they didn't have the material we have today.
No. I'm assuming they're not wearing North Face puffy jackets and, waterproof boots and Gore-Tex and all that good stuff. So the posse decided to return to Aklavik to get more supplies and men, which, okay, I could understand why you would want to do that.
Are you like, hey, we're coming back for you.
Wait here.
We're seeing you in about 16 days because it takes us 8 to get back and 8 to get back here again. And we might need a little rest in between.
Yeah, and I'm sure that had to have been part of the thought process. I mean, this guy Johnson's going to know, right, that they're leaving or that they have left. Is he just going to sit there with his cabin blasted open? Or in those 8 days, is he going to go somewhere else? In an effort to help the posse, 2 Army signalmen fashioned grenades and homemade gas bombs. By this point, the story was being covered by the local radio and papers. Reporters started calling Johnson the Mad Trapper of Rat River.
Well, you can see how he got that name.
For example, on January 13th, 1932, the Edmonton Journal reported 15-hour gun battle rages between Trapper and posse. It said, high explosive bombs and gunfire, maintained by an attacking force of 8 men for 15 hours, have failed to dislodge Albert Johnson. Arctic Trapper sought for the shooting of RCMP Constable A.W. King from his cabin stronghold on the old Yukon Trail. Johnson, who is believed to be demented, was challenged by the police and refused to surrender. He backed up this defiance with volleys from 2 automatic pistols, using one in either hand. Okay. Is believed to be demented. I mean, maybe back then, just from the very fact that you would shoot at a police officer.
Sure, yeah.
You might be considered demented.
Or that you decided to take a team of 8 guys in a gun battle.
Now, he did kind of have somewhat of an advantage in the fact that he was fortified. They had to come to try to get him. So he had an advantageous position, I think.
Yeah, he was in a good position.
Yeah. Now, with more modern weapons at their disposal, he'd be in a really bad position. Flashbangs, smoke grenades, things like that, tear gas. There are things that would easily drive you out, incapacitate you, and they just come in there and get you. The paper also reported that Johnson dug a tunnel under his cabin to protect himself from the dynamite blast.
This guy was resourceful.
He was. Constable Edgar Millen and Trapper Carl Gardlin returned to Johnson's cabin before the main party, but they were too late. Johnson was gone.
What, you mean he fled when you told him that you were leaving and coming back in 16 plus days?
Hey, we're leaving. Don't go anywhere. We need to get more bullets and warmer clothes and all that, but we are coming back.
Yeah, we're be here. You be here too for us.
And didn't quite take them that long, but it did take them, a few days. Inspector Eames' posse left Aklavik on January 16th and arrived at Johnson's cabin on the 17th. The posse agreed Johnson couldn't have traveled far in rugged, snowy terrain because he had no sled dogs to carry his supplies. They assumed he would be hiding within Rat River Canyon. The posse spent 4 days searching, but couldn't find him, Inspector Eames withdrew most of the posse so he could leave 9 days worth of rations with Constable Millen, trappers Carl Gardlin, and Noel Verville, and Army Signals Sergeant Frank Riddell. They found 2 caches of caribou Johnson killed in the fall of 1931. They hoped that he would return for it, but he never did. He's got to be eating something.
Yeah, well, yeah, has to.
Occasionally, the team spotted Johnson's trail through the snow, but they lost him repeatedly. McLean's reported his technique was clear. He traveled the glare ice along the creeks and along the high, hard-packed, windswept ridges between. At night, he would trek up a stream bed, pick a campsite, circle around it, backtrack, and bed down just off his trail, where he could ambush his pursuers. Slowly but surely, he was heading for the divide. Beyond the mountains, across the narrow neck of the Yukon, little more than 100 miles, lay Alaska.
Clearly, he was a good outdoorsman.
Yeah, he did seem to have some skills. You know, whether it was trapping or tracking or knowing maybe how to throw off being tracked. On January 28, 1932, Signal Sergeant Frank Riddell and posse member Noel Verville spotted Johnson tending to his campfire. They decided they wouldn't shoot. First of all, they weren't police officers, and they didn't want to risk accidentally killing Johnson. They retreated to fetch Constable Edgar Millen. And I get that, right? You know, if you're not a police officer, what are you going to do? You can't just open fire on this guy, can you?
Well, you shouldn't.
You don't have the legal right to, I don't believe, but...
Unless they deputize you.
Yeah. Now, if he fired at them, maybe legally they,
sure,
they could defend themselves. But Johnson was gone by the morning of January 29th, although the posse found him again on the 30th. And again, you find this guy, you leave, by the time you get back, what are the chances he's still going to be there?
I mean, he's very elusive.
Yeah, pretty small, right? Constable Millen instructed Frank Riddell, you and Carl circle the ridge, get down in those willows just behind him there on the creek bank. As soon as Noel and I see you're set, we'll slide down in front. If he comes out and starts shooting at us, you guys pick him off. If he doesn't lift his gun, he won't get hurt. So again, these guys didn't want to shoot him before, but now they're being told by an RCMP constable, if he comes out and starts shooting, fire away.
All fair game.
Pick him off. But that does make some sense, right? I believe as a citizen here in the States, if you were out somewhere, Gibbs, and you saw someone firing at a police officer, would you get in trouble if you shot that person? I don't know.
I don't know either. I think you probably...
Because the law, and it varies, right, from place to place, but it's not just that you can defend yourself. You can defend others as well. And I would think if someone's trying to kill a police officer and you stepped in and tried to help, I can't imagine you'd catch a charge for that, but I wouldn't want to be in that position to find out.
Yeah, maybe you could defend, but then you'd probably get pulled into some civil lawsuit or something.
Well, yeah, civilly you could get pulled into anything. I was talking more about, legally.
Legal, yeah.
Riddell and Gardlin picked a spot just 20 yards from Johnson. Millen and Verville came down the slope. Johnson saw them and hid in a snowy trench. Millen ordered him to come out. Johnson fired at them twice. Gardlin fired back from his hiding spot. Riddell joined Constable Millen. They listened for a moment and continued climbing down the bank, slowly approaching Johnson's barricade. Riddell saw a metallic stick protruding from the snow just before Johnson fired again. Riddell was grazed by Johnson's shot. Millen attempted to fire back, but was shot in the heart by Johnson. Constable Millen stood up, spun around, and fell face down in the snow. He died moments later. So, this doesn't sound like a great situation for these men.
No, they're not faring well at this moment.
Well, first of all, we just said he's barricaded.
Yeah.
He has a barricade, it said. So they're, trying to approach him. Again, it sounds like he's in a better position. He's in a defensible position, and they're a little more exposed.
Sounds like he had some skill set. He knew how to defend his spot.
The posse discovered that Millen's gun jammed due to a missing screw.
Of all things.
Well, when you're in a gun battle, your gun jamming is not a good thing. The posse realized they wouldn't be able to capture Johnson. So Carl Gardlin and Verville agreed to keep watch over him, while Frank Riddell left to get Inspector Eames. And again, some of these guys are, they're not even officers. So, how eager are they to try to capture this person? News of Millen's murder spread. Angry trappers came to Aklavik, wanting to help. On February 4th, Inspector Eames and a posse of 10 men surrounded the crime scene, but they learned Johnson fled during the night.
Are we surprised?
No, not surprised at all. He knew that they knew exactly where he was. Was he going to stick around and wait for them to regroup again, gather a bunch more men, and come back? No, he's going to take off. Johnson was on the run for several more days, but his time as a fugitive was coming to an end. Captain W.R. May was assisting the search with his monoplane, making him the first pilot to give direct aid in a manhunt, according to Maclean's magazine.
Well, that's kind of cool.
It really is. We kind of think of it today as pretty routine. Whether it's an airplane, oftentimes it's a helicopter. The police have vehicles that can really help track someone, keep them from getting away.
Yeah.
In the 1930s, you think about this guy who was a captain flying a monoplane to help search for this guy. It's kind of amazing. The Northwest was experiencing blizzard conditions, which hindered the search, but the skies were clear on February 11th, and Captain May was able to see Johnson's trail heading towards Bell Pass, which would get him to Alaska. So I think it's pretty obvious, right, that his goal is to cross over into Alaska
And get out of Canada.
Yeah. The posse didn't think Johnson could cross the divide alone and on foot with no supplies. At nightfall, RCMP Constable W.S. May, no relation to Captain May, from a detachment near Alaska, informed Inspector Eames that a group of moose hunters in Alaska saw snowshoe tracks down the Bell River. On February 13th, Captain May landed Inspector Eames, Sergeant Frank Riddell, and Trapper Carl Gardlin near Bell River in front of LaPierre House, a former outpost that served as a meeting point between Fort McPherson in Canada and Fort Yukon in Alaska. On the afternoon of February 14th, Captain May was able to get in the air for an hour. He could see Johnson's tracks along the Bell River disappearing at the mouth of the Eagle River. Johnson had taken his snowshoes off and stepped in the tracks left by a herd of migrating caribou.
See, he's a smart guy.
No, he really is doing some things that you would have to admit are very intelligent. He's trying to hide his tracks by stepping in the tracks of, some caribou. Constable W.S. May and his posse of 8 men arrived at LaPierre House on February 15th. By this point, Johnson was 4 days ahead of them.
That's a healthy head start. Anywhere, but especially the wilderness.
Yeah, given the terrain, we just mentioned it, right? Blizzard conditions. A trapper named Frank Johnson led the posse 15 miles down the Eagle River. By the evening of February 16th, they followed Johnson's trail, where it departed from the caribou herd. At 12 p.m. on February 17th, they were searching along the Eagle River. Army Staff Sergeant Heps Hersey was urging his team around a bend and saw a man approaching. It was Albert Johnson, backtracking his trail. Both men were in shock, but Johnson acted quickly. He put on his snowshoes and ran out of sight. Hersey readied his rifle and tried to get a clear view. Johnson was attempting to climb the South River bank and make a brush shelter. Hersey shot at him. Johnson returned fire and hit Hersey. Here's the other thing, Gibbs. There's a lot of firing going on. It does seem to me as though, this Johnson guy was a pretty good shot. These other guys are missing, and he's hitting quite a few of them.
I'm thinking Johnson needed to be a good shot. He was living off the land, probably didn't get a lot of extra attempts when you're hunting, so you got to make that first shot count.
Oh, that's very true. I'm not a hunter, but I would assume once that crack goes off, whatever you're hunting is taken off as well.
Then you're trying to hunt it down again later.
And then you're SOL. By now, the rest of the group was aware of what was happening. Johnson was unable to climb the South River bank, so he ran back up his trail towards a slope on the north bank, stopping to fire at the posse who were also shooting at him. At one point, Johnson stumbled, as if he were injured, but he flattened himself in the snow and opened fire. Inspector Eames shouted at Johnson to give up. Instead of speaking, Johnson fired another shot. The posse responded with heavy gunfire, and Johnson was hit. The Edmonton Journal reported in 1932, as Hersey kneeled to fire, a bullet plowed into his knee and continued into his chest at the same time, shattering the bone in his elbow. Within a moment, the remainder of the posse arrived, surrounded Johnson, and directed a hail of deadly lead slugs into him. As he sagged to the ground, the wanted man kept firing.
He was not going to give up.
No, it sounds to me as though, and you do hear this from some people on the run, right? They will not be taken alive, whether it's because they've already been to prison, they don't want to go back to prison. They would rather die or take their chances of dying to try to escape. And that's the sense that I get from this Johnson guy.
Yeah. If he was going to go out, he was taking other people with him.
Yeah, because he could have given up, 3 or 4 different times.
Oh, for sure.
But he just wasn't going to do it. Constable May approached and confirmed Johnson was dead. He'd been shot 6 times. 1 bullet severed his spine while he was reloading his gun. Heps Hersey was alive, but his elbow was shattered, 2 ribs were broken, and his lungs were pierced by Johnson's bullet. He was transported to the hospital by plane and survived his injuries.
And had a heck of a story to tell later.
A heck of a story, but it's also kind of amazing, right? You think about 1931, 32, they're out in the middle of nowhere. This guy takes a pretty brutal shot, and they're able to get him help, and he survives.
Makes you wonder if the cold had something to play with that.
Could have.
Yeah.
I don't think it hurt. Meanwhile, the posse surrounded Johnson and took a close look at him. He was extremely thin from 7 weeks on the run. He had dark circles under his eyes from fatigue.
Well, you're probably not sleeping a lot at night when you got a posse surrounding you or trying to find you.
Well, you got to be looking over your shoulder. You're constantly worried. Yeah, I can't imagine that you're getting much sleep, or at the very least good sleep, right? You got to keep one ear open or one eye open, or maybe one of each. But he's also not well supplied at this point. So he's not getting a lot to eat, which is going to make it really tough to keep up this trek, because he's probably burning a lot of calories.
Oh, yeah.
Every day.
Sure. Even not moving, just in that cold temperature, you're burning a lot of calories.
Yeah, that's a good point. He was carrying a razor, comb, mirror, needle, thread, a rag, fish hooks, wax, matches, nails, an axe, a pocket compass, 119 shells, a knife, 5 freshwater pearls, gold dust, over $2,000 in cash, and 2 pieces of gold bridge work that were made for someone else.
interesting supplies.
Yeah, there was a couple that kind of jumped out at me. A lot of it was, okay, survival type stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know about the comb. How are you really worried about what your hair looks like and how much product you have in it when you're on the run?
You never know who you're going to meet out there. But 119 shells, logging that around with.
Yeah. That wouldn't be light, but 5 freshwater pearls, gold dust, and this gold bridge work. I mean, that sounds to me like that, along with the cash, he's taking with him to have something.
Yeah, to buy whatever he needs.
Of value. Yeah. To this day, though, as we mentioned up front, Johnson remains unidentified. Several hundred people in Europe, the US, and Canada wrote to the RCMP claiming Johnson was their husband, father, brother, son, an escaped criminal, a convicted killer, a sniper, etc. But so far, no one's been right. And you see this in a lot of cases, right? Whether it's technically solved or unsolved. How many people have said, oh, my dad was D.B. Cooper. My great-grandfather was D.B. Cooper, or the Zodiac, or, you can list any of the big unsolved cases. There are always people who are going to claim that they believe one of their relatives was this person. The RCMP investigated every tip they received and sent Johnson's fingerprint and photograph to federal authorities in Washington, Stockholm, and London. There have been several promising leads over the years. According to Maclean's magazine, records show that in 1925, a man named Arthur Nelson was trapping along the Nelson River in British Columbia and moved north to the Yukon. He disappeared, and Albert Johnson appeared in the north. Their descriptions are apparently very similar. Arthur Nelson was seen with another man around the Peel River headwaters, but he was alone, 100 miles downriver. All that's known about Arthur Nelson is that he once said he was a Swedish-American farm boy from North Dakota.
That's not a lot of information.
It's not, but obviously it spawns theories, right? It's possible that Nelson killed his former partner. If he was also Albert Johnson, perhaps that partner was the owner of the gold bridges found on his person. He might have assumed a new identity to avoid the police.
Well, that sounds plausible.
Yeah, no, I think it does. Details of Arthur Nelson's life were recorded by researcher and author Richard North. North's 1989 book, Track Down, presents the theory that Albert Johnson, Arthur Nelson, and a North Dakota criminal named John Johnson were all the same person. All 3 men shared a similar physical description. John Johnson served time in San Quentin and Folsom prisons. North discovered that he was born in Norway in 1898 and was named Johann Conrad Johnson.
Well, those are 2 prisons that would not be fun to do any stints in.
No, not at all. And it's also amazing how long those prisons have
been around, yeah.
When you think about it.
But, if you were in those prisons, it would certainly be a reason that you would fight to the death not to go back.
Oh, absolutely. I can't imagine that the treatment of inmates was very good.
Yeah.
At those prisons in the early 1900s.
No way.
The conditions had to be horrible. The treatment, I'm sure, was horrible. But, this guy is potentially giving me some real Gibby vibes. Going by just a slew of aliases, not wanting anyone to know, who he really is. It's kind of how you live your life.
And am I really Gibby?
Don't know.
Exactly. I don't even know at this point. I've been living it so long.
However, DNA testing involving John Johnson's great nephew disproved that he was the mad trapper. The Johnston family from Pictou, Nova Scotia, believed that Albert Johnson was their relative Owen Albert Johnston, who left at the beginning of the Great Depression to find work in the U.S. The family received their last letter from Johnston in early 1931. It was posted from Revelstoke, British Columbia. They never heard from him again.
Revelstoke. Isn't that where Tarzan was from? I mean, I know it's all fictional.
I have no idea.
I'm just thinking that's where Tarzan was from or ended up being at the end.
I like the fact that you call him Tarzan.
Well, yeah.
Okay. Not Tarzan. Tarzan.
He
Tarzan.
likes to be known as Tarzan.
He likes. I don't remember ever really getting an explanation of the origins of the man, but maybe.
Could I be wrong?
Good. That's the funniest question you've ever asked. Could I be wrong? Yes, I could. But here again, right, you got a lot of families saying, well, we think it could be this guy, you know.
Right, yeah.
Uncle Fred or Uncle Al, you know, he went off to find his fortune. We never heard from him again. Could be him. Author Mark Fremelid wrote What Became of Sigvald Anyway, where he proposed the theory that a man named Sigvald Peterson Hoskjold was Albert Johnson. Sigvald was from Norway. By 1927, he was paranoid. The police were after him because he evaded conscription during the First World War. Records showed he built a cabin on Digby Island on the north coast of British Columbia before he disappeared.
So it sounds like maybe he had some skill set.
But, you know, also here we have somebody who's paranoid of the police. Well, Albert Johnson was pretty paranoid of the police.
Yes, he was.
Is that because he had a good reason to be? In August 2007, a forensic team hired by Myth Merchant Films located and exhumed Albert Johnson's grave in Aklavik and conducted a forensic examination on his remains. An isotopic analysis of his teeth suggested he grew up in Scandinavia or the Midwest of the United States. He was 35 years old when he died. He suffered from scoliosis. He had been shot multiple times in the leg, thorax, and pelvis. His femur was also fractured. Johnson had high-quality dental work, most likely from a major city like Chicago or New York. So it's pretty fascinating.
It really is.
You know, I've heard of, you know, this kind of isotope analysis before. I think maybe you and I have even talked about it.
We have.
Before, maybe recently, but you know, they can kind of figure out what type of food people ate, where that food was grown. Now, it does kind of seem strange that it's either Scandinavia or the Midwest of the U.S. Now, are they similar? Maybe in some respect.
Maybe. But then they talk about dental work, maybe like in Chicago. I think, well, that's more Midwest. You know, if anything, maybe he spent a lot of time in the Midwest. Chicago area.
Yeah. Or went to the big city to get this dental work done. You know, who knows? In 2017, researchers attempted a familial DNA investigation, but it wasn't until 2021 that Othram Labs was able to develop an adequate DNA sequence. And we've talked about Othram quite a bit, right? They have been instrumental in some of these genetic genealogy investigations, you know, familial DNA. Othram traced Johnson's ancestors to Sweden and linked him to descendants of Gustav Magnusson and Britta Svensdotter. He was connected to the towns of Hanger, Kavsjo, and Koltorp in Sweden.
What?
And I'm sure I said some of those incorrectly.
You most likely did.
I guarantee you I did. The one thing that did jump out at me is we have a number of listeners whose last name is Svensdotter.
Yeah, I wonder what they're thinking right now.
I know. I don't know.
I don't either, but they should be thinking something.
So far, DNA analysis has ruled out everyone who came forward as a potential relative of Albert Johnson. As the Edmonton Journal reported in 1932, the secret of Johnson's true identity died with him. and it may never be possible to clear up the mystery of who he was or where he came from. And in 1932, I understand that, right? Very limited technology. But I'm telling you right now, in 2025, if they have DNA, which it sounds like they do, there is a good chance that at some point, this mystery could be solved.
It could be.
It hasn't been yet, but it could be.
So come on, Schwinn daughters.
If you share similar ancestry to Albert Johnson or think you might be related to him, you can upload your DNA profile and opt in to a database that allows law enforcement search. And that is true of, a lot of the different
DNA vendors.
Yeah. And cold cases where they have DNA. Now, I get it. A lot of people are not crazy about opting in, right? To allow the police to compare their DNA for various reasons. And do you really want to know that one of your beloved relatives was really a killer or, kind of a heinous person? That might be tough for some people.
Not me. I got my DNA out there everywhere.
Whether it's wanted or not. You can also get tested through the DNA Solves Connect program or, upload data from Ancestry, 23andMe, MyHeritage, or Family Tree DNA. You can also contact Othram Incorporated at solve@othram.com. And like I said, Gibbs, I think this is something that can be solved. Sounds like they have usable DNA, but that being said, right, finding a match is tough. The kind of genealogy route can be a little easier because you don't have to hit the specific match.
Right.
Yeah, you just have to find someone in the family tree and then kind of work your way from there. At the very least, it allows you a starting point. I honestly believe that, that is a game changer. And we see it be a game changer.
Sure.
In many cases that have been solved within the last few years. I think it's going to continue to be. And there'll be something around the corner that's even better.
Yeah.
Right? That's just how everything goes. It'll be probably related to DNA, but it'll be even better than this.
Think about where we're at today. And we were joking earlier about the new year and 2025 and back in 1980.
Yeah.
In that span of time, what has developed in this world. And I can't imagine if you jump from 2025 to 2050, or, and definitely 2075, what the world will be like.
No. In both technology, whether it's crime fighting or just everyday life.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't even hazard a guess, to be honest with you. But I do think more and more cases are going to be solved. I don't know how many people are doing this type of stuff, of uploading their DNA to some of these services and opting in. And again, that's a personal choice.
Sure it is.
I would never look down on somebody because they said, you know what? That's not something I want to do.
No.
That's you're
right.
Right. That's your decision. I don't think there's any right or wrong in it. I just want to make sure people know about it, and then they can make an informed decision based on their beliefs or whatever. No doubt, though, it is much easier than trying to match one specific DNA sequence or whatever you call it.
Yes.
Right. If you can make the pool bigger, then you have a better chance of hitting. It may not be a match, but you're in the right ballpark.
Yeah, it gets you there.
Now you just have to find your seat or that person's seat.
Very true.
As my dog is barking. The dog is barking, saying, hey, wrap it up.
That's right.
Wrap it up. So that is it for our episode on the Mad Trapper. We got some voicemails. You want to check those out?
Let's hear them.
Hey, Mike and Gibby. It's Kathy from Canton, North Carolina, 31 miles from the Tennessee line. I've been a fan of yours for several years and just recently become a Patreon member. I'm retired now and just been able to binge from the very beginning. And also, when we had the bad floods back here several months ago, it was great to listen to you guys and your banter back and forth just to take my mind off the destruction around this area. Well, thanks for all you do, and keep up the great job. Keep your own time ticking, and I'm a Team Gibby. Bye.
And they did go through some destruction, too, in that area.
Yeah, it was bad.
Yeah.
Really bad. Love her accent.
Absolutely.
Absolutely love it. And appreciate the fact that you joined Patreon.
Yes.
That means a lot to us.
And you can tell she's very intelligent.
Because she's Team Gibby.
Oh, that's one of the reasons. Not the only.
Hello, Mike and Gibby. First-time caller, long-time listener. I've been listening since I can remember. I'm all caught up on the regular true crime, but I'm still catching up on the unsolved. Love both of you guys. Love your messages. Love everything you're doing. Right now, I'm binging on the unsolved because I am caught up on the true crime all the time podcasts. I have a question for you. I was born and raised in Idaho Springs, Colorado, and wondering if you would ever be interested in looking into the case of Beth Miller. Beth Miller was one who, when I was a small child, disappeared while going on a jog, and to this day, it's been unsolved. There's nothing that anybody knows at all. Love you guys. If I have to choose a team, I don't know. Love you both. You're great together. I would have to go with Gibby. Just because Gibby, man, Fergie, you beat him up. So I got to be on the underdog side. Love you guys. Want to continue listening. I look forward to every episode you guys have. By the way, I'm in Houston, Texas right now, but born and raised in the mountains of Colorado. Thank you, guys. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep your head on a swivel. Keep your own time ticking. Thank you.
All right. Great voicemail. Love it. Appreciate it. We'll put that Beth Miller down on our list and
potential.
Yeah. Do some research on it. I do think he hit on something there, and it's the concept of the underdog. You play that to perfection.
Who, me?
You have from the very beginning, but I have also made you at times appear to be the underdog from our banter. You definitely are not in real life, but on the show, you are an underdog figure.
Some of it I do to myself.
You do. But some of it I do. It's just,
it's all good fun.
It's just how we roll.
Yes.
But we appreciate the voicemails.
We do.
All right, buddy. That is it for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
Pluto TV is a place for movie fans like me.
And TV fans like me.
They've got something for everyone, and it's free.
I love free, and I love Jersey Shore.
For me, it's The Godfather.
SpongeBob SquarePants, I am Patrick. Patrick is me.
Oh, Forrest Gump, come on.
Criminal Minds, solving crime after bedtime.
Whatever you love to watch, Pluto TV makes it easy with thousands of free movies and shows.
Pluto TV, stream now, pay never.